Should just be a second. You probably have to go out and go back in again. We're good. We're live.
Great. All right. Welcome, everyone. Apologize for the late start with us moving to a Zoom format for this meeting to accommodate various schedules, including my own. We had to organize some technical matters before we got going, and that took us a little longer anticipated. But we are here, we are live, and we're ready to proceed. So I am going to call to order this regular meeting of council for Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. And I'd like to start in the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth to honor and acknowledge the Canmore area, known as Shooting at Willows in Stoney Nakoda, and the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Stoney Nakoda, comprised of the Bearspaw First Nation, Chiniki First Nation, and Wesley First Nation, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. We acknowledge all nations who live, work, and play and help us steward this land and who honor and celebrate this territory. And now I will move to the agenda. There is one addition to the agenda, A3, introduction of the new GM of Municipal Services. Just looking to see if there are any other amendments to the agenda. Thank you, Dr. Cottle. Seeing none, I move approval of the agenda for June 7th, 2022 regular meeting of council as amended. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, we've got a delegation with us who, strangely enough, we're often sitting there in person lately, and we have a Zoom of a presentation, but now we have the presentation live in council chambers, and we're on Zoom. So I welcome the Bow Valley Clean Air Society to us today.
Perfect. Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Caitlin Van Gaal, and I am the Supervisor of Environment and Sustainability with the Town of Canmore. I'm here today to introduce Hal Retzer, a board member with the Bow Valley Clean Air Society. Mr. Retzer will be providing Council with a brief presentation on some of the work that the Bow Valley Clean Air Society has undertaken over the past several months regarding open doors in downtown Canmore. I will now hand it over to Mr. Retzer to provide more detail. Thank you.
Mr. Retzer, welcome to Council.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today and on the work we've done in support of a closed door bylaw. I think Cheryl's just trying to get the screen up. There we go. So the Bow Valley Clean Air Society has been around for about 20 years. In fact, in July of this year, we'll have reached our 20th year. We're a fairly quiet organization, but we do spend a fair bit of time in front of industry in the Valley. And when members are passionate about certain things, such as a closed door bylaw, we tend to engage in a more active way. So, thanks, Cheryl. So back in March, we did a survey throughout downtown Canmore, primarily along Main Street, but also some adjacent streets as well. And we simply counted how many open doors that we saw at the various shops. And our goal here was to try to see how quantify how significant the issue actually was. And so we tried to get a good temperature range, and we're fortunate we did, anywhere from -5 to +15. And so we gathered that data, and then the purpose was to actually determine how much the actual energy loss was in greenhouse gas emissions that were actually, would be actually wasted by having all these doors open. We typically took only took data between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. When we actually did the analysis for the greenhouse gas emissions. We also only looked at when heating was required. We didn't look at the air conditioning season. That's another topic that we could talk about. But primarily this was around heating with natural gas as a result of having wasted energy, result of having to heat more, having a door open. And here's what we found. So this graph is really a observation on how many times we observe certain shops with their doors open. And you can see on the far left-hand side of the graph that, for example, shop number 1, every 8 out of 10 times, or about 80% of the time that we went by along Main Street, the door was open. The other extreme, some shops way out on the far right-hand side, not quite the far right side, but around shop number 46, for example, we probably only observed that door being open once. Some shops that weren't on Main Street, and which we didn't actually include in our analysis for the greenhouse gas emissions, some shops are open all the time. Some shops, every time we went by, had their doors open. And again, this is from -5 to +15, so it was quite a large temperature range. So to determine the actual greenhouse gas emissions being wasted as having all these doors open, what we attempted to do, or what we did do, is get a bit of an idea of how many doors are open at different temperatures. So no surprise, as it gets warmer, more shops open their doors. And you can see in the far right-hand side of the graph, on the warmest day that we took a survey on, there was actually 30 shops open, had their doors open, which represents about 45% of the actual doors or shops in Canmore, or on Main Street. Again, this is only Main Street, doesn't include areas outside of Main Street. So this data, if you can flip the next slide, Cheryl, this data was then used to generate an idea of how much GHGs are actually being emitted. So without getting too much detail on it, I mean, what we were trying to do is say, okay, what are the GHGs when it gets warmer? What are they when it gets colder? And no surprise, when it's really cold, the greenhouse gas emissions actually go up. But we found that as it warmed up, we were sort of expecting the greenhouse gas emissions and the energy loss through open doors to actually, probably go down to almost 0. And they didn't quite. In that 10 to 15 range, or 10 to 17 range in the far right-hand side of the graph, there's still a lot of energy being wasted. And so this was the basis for our thinking for a 15 degrees C cutoff on ambient temperatures. So the purpose was we need to come up with a time stamp or a temperature stamp and then a time range when a bylaw would be in place. So the far right-hand line you see there in red, that's the 15-degree cutoff. And we think we should be trying to capture all the GHGs that are lost all the way through by having shops close their doors. I show a green line at 6 degrees C, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but that's actually the line that Banff has ended up at with their bylaw. I think most people probably know that Banff has actually gone ahead and done a bylaw. They didn't pick 6 degrees, they picked a timestamp that ended up being about 6 degrees. And we'll talk about that in a minute here. So here's the results based on a 15-degree cutoff, and without getting into too much detail, about halfway down this graph, you can see there's about, again, extrapolating for the whole year, there's about 32 tons a year of CO2 emissions. And you say, well, that's not really that much when you think about the whole town of Canmore, which is in the hundreds of thousands of tons of CO2 emissions a year. But when you sort of put it into perspective how many passenger flights that is, say from Calgary to Toronto, it becomes more significant. There's 53, it's equivalent to about 53 passenger return flights back and forth from Calgary to Toronto. And so is it significant? We believe it is, and we believe it's significant primarily from the perspective it's really low-hanging fruit to mitigate, to basically avoid. Simply a matter of just closing doors. And we also think this data is conservative because it's only Main Street. It doesn't include temperatures below -5 because we didn't actually have any data below -5. Banff actually picked up data that went quite a lot colder, and they saw many doors open at colder temperatures. It also is only between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. When most shops are only open, and it doesn't include the air conditioning season as well. So next slide, Cheryl. So this graph here is really a graph of the average temperature throughout the year, and it's right out of the Banff report, actually, this particular graph. And what you see here is the two vertical green lines that go through about end of April or early May through mid-October are the time ranges that Banff has picked. And so they picked, they've said that they have their bylaw in place from October long weekend through to the end of April. And so you can sort of see, if you sort of do a best fit through the blue squiggly lines going up and down, you can sort of see that corresponds to that 6 degrees C that I mentioned before. So we think that is way too cold a temperature to leave doors open at. And so we've maintained that this 15 degrees C is a better number to actually target. And so the top line, red dotted line that you see there is actually the 15-degree cutoff, which drives a timestamp from early September to early June for a closure period to be in place for a bylaw. So it's unfortunate Banff, and I know there's reasons why Banff ended up there, but we feel there was way more GHGs on the table that could have been saved, and so we're proposing for Canmore to pick a timestamp that is a broader timestamp. And we picked a timestamp instead of a temperature stamp simply because the enforcing the time duration when a bylaw will be in place should be easier, we think, than having a certain temperature. Because temperatures change. The sunny side of the street may argue it's warmer on the sunny side of the street, so we can have their shop doors open. So that way, and Banff came to that same conclusion. They drove their reason to go from a temperature to a time-based closure period was the same. So, and why bylaw? Back in 2018, 2019, BVCAS, Boulder Valley Cleaner Society, went around and visited a bunch of shop doors in both Canmore and Banff, and we had very little traction, very little pickup on getting, or very little success in getting shops to close their doors. We even gave a little sign out, you see on the top right, on the right-hand side of the slide here, with the purpose of trying to have shop owners actually close their doors and display this sign. We had, like I said, we had very little pickup on it. There's one shop in town that actually is displaying that sign, so we're quite pleased about that. We looked at other places that have a bylaw in place, and surprisingly enough, we couldn't actually find other tourist towns in particular that had bylaws. The folks at Banff actually spent a lot of time trying to find other tourist towns that had them, and surprisingly enough, that open doors were just not an issue elsewhere. And I say not an issue is that store owners simply did not leave their doors open in cold weather. So Banff and Canmore seem to be a bit unique in this way, that there's this perceived benefit to having their shop doors open. So I guess, we could be leaders like Banff has been and actually invoke a bylaw to get shops to keep their doors closed. It would also, if once shop doors are being kept closed, it would no doubt improve some of the visitor and public perception that we really take our climate action plan seriously. It's hard to take it seriously when so many shop doors are open. And there's going to be some pushback, fully acknowledge that. But one hopes that if everybody keeps their shop doors closed, there's not this perceived advantage of having advertising advantage of having any particular shop that has their door open. So with all that, Cheryl, we're asking of council today is that they direct administration to implement a closed door bylaw from approximately early September to early June, based on a 15 degrees C timestamp. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Retzer, and thank you for the Bow Valley Clean Air Society in doing all of this work. I know you contacted us a while back, and there was some information that we thought would be helpful, and you went and got that information. And I think it's been a very good process. Getting to the delegation here. I had a question, is there any concerns around open doors in the summer with air conditioning? And I don't know if air conditioning is very rampant with stores in Canmore or not. Have you given any thought around that?
Yeah, we did, and a couple of things. You're not the first person that asked this, Sean. Other folks have said, why not include an air conditioning season as well? A couple of things on that. Air conditioners are much more efficient at reducing the temperatures relative to heating with a furnace. So you lose some of the benefit with air conditioners. Air conditioners are a heat pump, so they're a lot more efficient at actually reducing the energy. So the prize on air conditioning is not as great on the heating cycle. And we also don't see the extreme temperatures. We did last June, of course, but we often don't see the same sort of extreme as we see on the cold end of the spectrum versus the hot end of the spectrum. But by all means, a bylaw on the air conditioning side would, if it included that would be catching all the emissions that we could possibly be wasting here. So it could be done. The analysis can be done. You pick a different temperature for the air conditioning season, but we didn't because the price isn't as great. That was why, Sean.
Right, great. Thank you for that. Look to council to see if there are any other questions. Councillor Mara.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Retzer, for your presentation. I just have a couple questions. Did you ask businesses how they heat their business? Like I know some are on a boiler system, some are natural gas, some have used electricity. Just wondering what the general consensus was that you found out.
We didn't ask, but I'm quite certain most of them use either a boiler or a furnace system. And the analysis that we did assumed we were heating with natural gas, whether it was a boiler or a furnace, it didn't really matter. It's just simply a matter of you burn so many gigajoules of energy in natural gas, and that's what we use to convert to the greenhouse gases that we calculated. So we didn't actually do that calc. I don't. There may be some people that heat with electricity. It's possible. I don't know. It probably wouldn't really matter. The energy lost is the same whether it's electricity, natural gas, or whether it's or boilers, furnaces, natural gas, or the GHGs are more or less the same regardless.
I was just curious about that. If I may, another question, Mayor?
Yes. Yeah.
You said that your group, the BVCAS, went door to door to meet with owners of businesses. Did you also do any presentations with the BIA, the Chamber of Commerce, or the Canmore Business Association?
No, we didn't, Karen. We just ran out of resources for that. I know that was suggested. We did not get to that point.
Okay. I did have one other question and comment. I think I asked this once before and probably not in public, but regarding your open sign, have there any other programs that you have thought of, like maybe a sticker that says that they support your BVCAS and they would have some sort of recognition being part of it that might encourage them to also close their doors?
We didn't do that. We thought our sign would be a pretty good advertising that this is why we're having our shop doors open. Fortunately, we only gave out about a few signs. Most shops weren't really interested in taking them, and for a number of reasons. And so that was our main driver for getting the message out there, Karen.
Okay, thank you. I'll let my fellow councillors ask some questions.
Councillor Ma.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Retzer, for the scientific rigor of the presentation here. It's not always a delegation comes by with so many impressive graphs and data points.
Well, you're an engineer, you'd appreciate that, Jeff.
I know, so I applaud this. Quick question, I think this is for the public's clarification. On figure 4, okay, if there's a GHG emissions through open doors, Main Street, Canmore. And on that figure, there's a bit of a blue spike, a bit of a pyramid. And I think at first glance, when someone looks at this graph, they would think, oh, when it's like between 2 to 5 degrees, that's when we have the most GHG emissions through open doors on Main Street. But that's because there just happen to be more people having doors open. So am I correct to assume that the colder it gets, like if you have your door open, the colder it gets, obviously the more GHG emissions you'll be creating?
Correct, on a per door basis, no question about that.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to clarify. So it's the per door. And so so this graph here is not like, don't read this graph and think, oh, it's -20. It's not as big a deal as me opening my door at +2 to 5. I should just open it. It's the per door count. So that's how that factors in.
So, but Jeff, to be clear, this graph is actually so as it gets warmer, there's up to 30 doors that are actually open. So this takes into account that there are more doors open as it gets warmer.
Yeah.
But you just lose less energy per door.
Right. Okay. So it's a shopkeeper behavior thing as well too. Okay. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Retzer, for this presentation. I really appreciate it. This is one of the, I walk down Main Street almost every day. And a few years ago, it was just a couple doors, and now it seems to be more and more. And I'm wondering if you could help us understand why, it sounds like Banff and Canmore are kind of an anomaly in this open door strategy. Can you help us understand why some businesses feel this is acceptable or permissible, or what benefit does it bring to their company?
What we heard was that it's really a advertising, we are open symbol. That's what it is. It's primarily the stores that are selling tourist items, galleries. A lot of the galleries are some of the worst offenders. I won't mention names, but virtually all of them routinely had their doors open. And I think it's a message that as you're walking by, I think people, but we've done a little bit of research that there may be some of that benefit that's out there. If a door's open, it may entice people to come in. But it's not as much as what most folks think, or most shop owners think. That's what we researched. But on top of that, if everybody kept their doors open, then there's no real advertising advantage for one shop over another. That's the logic. That if one person keeps the door open, there might be an advantage. But if everybody has their doors closed, then that advantage should be diminished.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's a perception thing that there's some sort of advantage here, and the more people that are doing it, that encourages other people to do it as well. Right. The other thing I've noticed is that it tends to be the south-facing businesses that have them open generally. Was that your observation as well?
No, I wouldn't say that at all, Councillor. Okay. We actually saw a pretty equal number on both the south side and the sunny side and the shady side.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. For me, I don't have my doors open in the wintertime at home, and I don't have them for my business either. And I'm one of those dads that's like, keep the door closed when the AC's on. We bought AC for the first time last year, which, the summers are getting hotter. Is there any thought to not a time period or a temperature period, but just if there's any sort of heating or air conditioning unit being employed, that the doors are closed? Like kind of that duality?
Yeah, I mean, that would certainly get every bit of greenhouse gases that are being emitted and lost, if that was the criteria. So yeah, for sure, that's the best way. But I guess how do you enforce that? Like the folks in the sunny side of the street, they may say, well, we've got more solar radiation coming in. Our furnaces don't run as much. Whereas the shady side will say, on a cool day, they can have the doors open because their air conditioners aren't running, for example. So we just thought it was very difficult to enforce, and so we kind of ended up at that on a time stamp instead of a temperature stamp for that reason. But yeah, that would get the best, if there was a mechanism to do that, that would by far the best benefit from reducing energy loss, there's no question. If you could just say, furnace runs, air conditioner runs, your doors are closed. That's how you run at home. That's how you do things at home. So.
That is how I do it at home. Yeah. I think that's how most people do it at home.
Yeah.
And one more, if I may, your worship.
Sure.
I believe that Banff had a large discussion around, or a significant discussion around air curtains and the efficiency of air curtains. I don't see those employed as much in Canmore, but I'm wondering if you could speak to that technology.
Yeah, and actually Banff did a lot of work on air curtains, and we did a bit of research in parallel to what Banff had done. And what we found is that air curtains, they're not without energy consumption. And yeah, they may help reduce some energy loss with an open door, but they're far from perfect. They're nowhere near as good as a closed door. But the energy they consume can be up to about half of the energy that you're losing through the door, because they are fairly high-speed fans. And Banff actually found that many places that air curtains actually had space heaters inside the buildings anyways, even for the staff to work there to make it more comfortable for staff. So the air curtains are not as effective. They consume energy, and we think that they just close. It's just easy to close the door. We're not promoting air curtains at all.
I want to thank you for all the effort you guys put into this, and I look forward to a further discussion here shortly.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Just looking to if there's any other questions from council. Seeing none, Mr. Retzer, thank you very much for your time today. I'm sure you've been advised that our process is...
Councilor Mara has a question. I saw her sticker.
Oh, Councillor Merrow. Thank you, Councillor McCallum.
Thank you. I just had one other question for you, Mr. Retzer. I was curious, when you're looking at a closed door policy for businesses, are you looking town-wide to include all businesses?
Yes, we would see that it would be town-wide, because, you know, there's some of the survey that we took was over in Spring Creek, for example, and there was a number of doors there that had their shops open. Shops at Canmore have their doors open. So yeah, we would say this would be we would propose a town-wide a mandate or a bylaw.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Councilor. Thank you, Councilor.
Yes. So yes, thanks for that. As I was saying, our process is that we don't make a motion or make any decision today. When a delegation comes to us, we put it on the agenda for the next council meeting. So tune in on July 5th, and we will make some form of motion in response to your delegation today.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Have a great day.
You too.
All right. Now I was so excited to get going in our meeting that I skipped the very item that I had it. So we're going to actually deal with A3. And I'd like to invite Dr. Cottle to introduce our new GM of Municipal Services.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert. I'm really thrilled to be making this introduction. As all of you know, Scott Mackay has been working for the town for some time. He started with us in 2012, before we were opening Elevation Place, actually. And just as a reminder, at the time, we had never had a climbing gym in any of our services. So we needed to hire before we opened. There's a lot of things to think about and set up when you're opening a climbing gym. And Scott was part of the team of the initial hires for that work. And then he moved into the supervisor of climbing role. And as you all know, the climbing gym has been incredibly successful at Elevation Place, in large part to Scott's leadership and all of the systems and excellent hiring that he did in setting the gym up. In 2018, our manager of recreation at the time, Jim Yonker, was seconded to the potential Olympic bid. And so Scott had a year working in the role as manager of recreation, and then moved into that role permanently in 2021. When I moved into the CAO role, we did an open call to managers who were interested in backfilling while we did a search, and Scott was successful in moving into the acting role. We did do a full search and had many qualified candidates for the full-time general manager of municipal services role, but Scott really stood out. So we did pre-interviews, we did several first interviews, and then a round of second interviews. And Scott was by far the best fit and the most talented candidate. And he's really, just since he's been in the acting role, already made a significant contribution and become a really valued member of the corporate strategic team. So I'm really thrilled that he's accepted and to have him here officially. And I don't know, Scott, if there's anything, if you want to say anything, you don't have to, but welcome aboard.
Well, thank you for your kind words, Dr. Cottle. You know, I think it's a really exciting time for me to be moving into to a role such as this one. You know, I think this, I'm quite look forward to working with this council more closely, and I know you'll be discussing your strategic plan later today, but that's inspiring to me, your strategic plan and where you want to take the community. So I'm really looking forward to providing support to this group and the community at large to move some of these things forward.
Well, Mr. Mackay, we are thrilled that you were hired into this position on a no longer acting but full-time basis. And welcome and thank you for your continued service to the town of Canmore. With that, I'll now move to item D. D1, approval of the minutes of May 3rd, 2022. Looking to council to see if there's any errors or omissions. Seeing Nobody wanting to speak to that. I will move the approval of the minutes of May 3rd, 2022 regular meeting of council as circulated. All of those in favor? Carried unanimously. We'll now move to item E1. This is the delegation that we heard last month from the Bow Valley Primary Care Network request. I'm going to make a motion in response to that request. The request was that council consider providing a qualified town of Canmore staff member with relevant experience to participate on a local committee to identify retention and recruitment strategy for primary care providers. I'd like to say a few things. One, I very much appreciate that the Bow Valley Primary Care Network came and spoke to us, and that they are taking a proactive approach to dealing with attracting of physicians to our valley, and in particularly to Canmore. I'd also like to say that if we had the ability to provide such a staff member, we would certainly seriously consider doing so. But looking at the human resources that we do have, the advice that was received was that that it actually wouldn't work that well. So I will be putting a motion on the table to accept the request as information only. However, I do so in the context of all of council being now very much aware of your activities. I know that already there's been recommendations of people that to sit on this committee by various council members. And we will continue to do so. It's also open if there is any member of council that would like to participate further. You certainly are able to do so. It would be on a non-per-diemable basis because it hasn't been part of our budget, but there is also that opportunity. So it is with thanks that I put on the motion on the table now to accept the request from the Bow Valley Primary Care Network as information only. And would anyone like to speak to that motion? Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert. I think that this is a really smart way to move forward in terms of supporting the primary care network in the best way that we can. And I would encourage them through this work that when there is a recruitment strategy, because it is the Bow Valley Primary Care Network, that we work together with our colleagues in the community of Banff and the MD of Bighorn to support that strategy if we can. I will be voting in favor of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak to this motion? Councillor McCallum.
Thank you. I will be voting in favor of this motion as well. I have actually been approached by a couple of prominent members of the community and have forwarded at least one of their contact information to the executive director. There's people out there that have experience that want to help, and that I agree with Councillor Faubert in terms of a valley-wide approach. But we also have people in our community that have far more expertise in this than you and I do. But I am grateful for them bringing this forward. It is now, in everybody's line of sight that this is an important matter that we need to address, and that we need to address this as a valley because it just doesn't affect one community on its own.
Agreed. Councillor Maud, did you have something you wanted to say?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to echo the sentiments that Councillor Faubert and McCallum did. I think now that this is front and center, we can start making some more progress on it. It's on our minds. I do feel when we take a look at some more of our housing initiatives and workshops coming up, this will also be front of mind so that we can help and think and see through that lens as well too. So I'll be voting in support. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Not seeing anyone else that would like to speak to the motion, I'll now call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. I'll now move to item E2, paid parking monthly passes. And I'll look to see who from administration will be making that presentation. Report. Oh, Mr. Mackay.
I suspect we're just getting things lined up in the background there.
All right, thank you.
Yes,
Is it Ms. Lawanig? Oh, there we go.
Yep, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, Ms. Lawanig, feel free to put on your video and welcome to council.
Thank you for having me. Let me just work on sharing my screen. There you go. I just want to verify that you can see it.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, one moment.
Here we go.
Is this?
So we can see your screen with the slides there. It's not in presentation mode yet, but there we go. You're good to go.
Give me one moment. Okay. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me. Today, I will be providing a recommendation with regard to non-resident employee monthly passes for the town center. So just to provide some background in addition to what it provided last month, paid parking is being introduced this summer to the town center as part of the Integrated Parking Management Plan, which was approved by Council in 2018. The goals of the IPMP include providing the right mix of parking options to meet the needs of residents, visitors, workers, and shoppers, ensuring high-use parking areas are not exceeding capacity during peak season days on a regular basis, and focusing on using parking facilities efficiently, not simply providing more parking space, which does come with a cost. As a result of paid parking being introduced, administration has received requests from various parking users to allow for continued all-day parking use by non-resident employees of the town center. This plan outlines all-day parking by employees to be an intensive and lower value use of parking. The 2022 paid parking program works to optimize our existing parking spaces. Administration is recommending for council to receive this report as information and allow the paid parking program to continue as is with no amendments regarding non-resident employee monthly passes. Doing so would benefit the town and the community in a variety of ways. Free all-day parking is available within close proximity to the town center, making it the most affordable option for all-day parkers, with little to no change in walking distance from the current free all-day lots into the town center. In addition to approximately 350 publicly owned stalls, there are approximately 400 privately owned parking stalls within the town center that could be optimized by businesses. To accommodate those who need to load or unload goods in the town center and those with mobility issues, accessible and loading zones will remain free. Local businesses will be able to obtain RPPs for any of their vehicles that are registered under the business name. Most importantly, this option aligns with the goals of the Integrated Parking Management Plan by encouraging vehicle turnover in the town center and providing all-day parking lots for those who must drive into the town center. The 2022 paid parking program will be monitored through parking utilization studies, and adjustments will be considered as needed. A variety of alternative options were considered by administration. This includes a monthly pass for employees of the town center, a monthly pass for the general public, and an option for businesses to register their employees as residents. None of the above options are recommended due to logistical issues. When looking at these options, we need to look at not only the convenience for employees of the town center, but also feasibility and cost to the town. Establishing a monthly pass permitting system specifically for employees would have a base cost of $7,500, in addition to extra labor costs needed to manually process permits, as this cannot be automated. To eliminate these extra costs, a monthly pass that is open to anyone was considered at $144 per month in the peak season and $96 per month in the off-peak season. The pricing for this option was calculated with consideration for operational and maintenance cost recovery. It was also considered to allow businesses to enroll their non-resident employees as residents. This type of program would come at a cost to the employer and would provide their employees with RTTs, as well as the ability to purchase the resident monthly pass if they desire. This type of program would entail a lot of manual verification at a much higher frequency than residents. We are recommending to proceed with the program as planned without implementing any form of non-resident monthly pass. Non-resident employees are not being left unaccounted for. We recognize that affordability is an issue across the Bow Valley. A significant amount of free parking spaces exist directly surrounding the town center. Implementing a monthly pass option would cost non-resident employees a minimum of approximately $1,440 per calendar year, in addition to placing extra strain on the existing Town of Canmore finance and municipal enforcement teams. Maintaining the paid parking program as is would ensure non-resident employees are not incurring needless costs for monthly passes, while ensuring parking spaces in high-use areas are being employed for the highest value uses, which is in accordance with the goals of the IPMP. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lewanig, for the excellent presentation. When I had made the motion that prompted this report, I was most interested in the third option that you were describing, and that was allowing businesses to enroll their non-resident employees as residents so they could get the 3 hours free or the parking in the resident parking zone. I'm wondering about the $7,500 development fee with respect to that option. Can you elaborate on why there would be a $7,500 fee?
So this $7,500 fee would come as a change order to our initial contract. This was not identified when we first put out our request for quotation. And when we accepted the contract, and bear with me, as the contract was agreed upon before I came on board, but this would be a change order to what it is that we had initially asked of our contractors.
So the change would be the ability to manually enter in another license plate that gets that is treated as a resident permit?
Yeah, so this type of permit was not identified as something that we had wanted initially as part of our contract with our parking vendor. So in order for them to actually implement this type of permit processing system, we would have the $7,500 change order fee.
So if a resident was having trouble with the online registration, maybe it was their technology didn't allow for them to participate, or they didn't have the right type of document or whatever, does that resident have the opportunity to come down to the Civic Center and provide their proof of residency, and then they get entered into the system manually?
Absolutely. We do have a workaround for people who do not have email addresses. And we also do have currently a staff member at our front desk from the parking team who's able to assist individuals who are having trouble registering online.
So theoretically, couldn't it be the same thing without needing to do a change order, that if we regarded non-residents as being eligible for the resident, we determine what is needed to prove that, and then they just get entered manually without doing the change order?
So this type of entering of permits in our system would entail a lot more manual verification, which would come not necessarily as a cost in a change order, but the cost would come in manual labor and administrative fees from the town staff. Our town staff are already working very, very hard to process all of the permits that we have been getting since we launched last week. And I can definitely see that needing to verify employment on a monthly basis would add to these pressures that our administrative staff are feeling.
Yeah, well, I'm not certain it would have to be on a monthly basis. There might be some other way of doing that, but it seems to me that we we might have an information gap. And I'm going to ask actually a question of Councillor Ma, because he's our council's representative on the BIA. And Councillor Ma, I was just wondering, it seems to me that we need to have a sense, or it would be helpful to have a sense of how many non-resident employees we have in the downtown area. And I was wondering, would you be at all inclined to find out from the BIA or work with their executive director to try to get a handle on how many non-resident employees of the town center we actually have? Like, it's obviously, if there's, using big numbers, 10 is different than
for sure
500.
Yeah, like,
right?
like absolutely, sir. Like I can totally go back to our ED at the BIA and just have him like do a quick poll and understand, because I can understand Ms. Lina Wang's concern. It might open some potential floodgate situation of whatever, some number would be overwhelming, but it could be very quite possible that the quantity is actually would not be that onerous. So I can definitely go back and find out that number for sure.
Great. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Opening up to, it's an excellent report, and I'm just opening it up to council to see if there's any other questions. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Krausert. Thank you, Ms. Langham, for presenting to us today. We have changed our parking program for the better, in my opinion, since it first was incepted in 2019 when it was approved by council. And we have learned from our neighbor to the west of us in terms of some of the strategies that they have used. Can you tell me, do they have a non-resident parking pass in Banff? Do you happen to know that? And do they also have a monthly pass for residents outside of the 3 hours that you're permitted, similar to our program?
Banff does not have a non-resident employee monthly pass. They do direct all commuters to park in their satellite lot, similar to as we are doing at the moment. They do not have a monthly pass for residents as well.
And do you happen to know what they're farther in the weeds into this than we are. Do you happen to know what their experience has been at all?
I believe that they've had quite the positive experience. They have, their satellite lots that they use, that they direct their long-term parkers to. They have the same goals as us in the sense of wanting to use high-use parking spaces as, quick turnover paid stalls, and directing long-term 8 to 9 hour parkers to their 9-hour parking lot.
Excellent, thanks. I have spoken to a few councillors in Banff and have heard similar things, but I just wanted to know from an admin to admin perspective if you'd had a different response. Thank you very much.
Councillor McCallum, just following up on that question, do you happen to know if the town of Banff has the same sort of non-resident employees that presumably beyond Canmore, because obviously if you're in Canmore, you can take the bus there and vice versa. I'm wondering, like Cochrane,
I'm not sure. I know that there's people from Banff that come and work in Canmore, so they would be used to the scheme that we've come up with. In fact, it's more favorable to them because they can get a monthly pass. I actually don't. Actually, you know what? I know quite a few people that live in the MD that work in Banff. Actually, okay. Now that I think about it, including my own family. Okay, so I just blanked out on that completely.
Sure.
In Canmore, yeah, we all know people. There's tons of Canmore residents that that work in Banff, and some of them come from other, like up in Three Sisters Park, closer to downtown, and get on the Roam, as we know.
Yeah. The Roam kind of deals with the Banff to Canmore thing. I was just wondering, outside of Canmore.
I would remind you that was a choice by our communities. Outlying communities have the ability to choose to connect or to build partnerships with transit as well, if they choose to.
Absolutely.
That's been their choice as a community.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Mora, you had a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Luminag, you quoted a price of $14.40 if a non-resident was to buy a monthly pass for peak season and off season. Is that correct? Is that where that number came from?
Yes. So that those numbers came from the second option of having a public monthly pass, which would not require any sort of verification, but would be still priced at a rate to make it as affordable as possible for those who are commuting in. It was priced based on operational costs and maintenance costs. I believe Mr. Astarte should be here. He has helped me come up with all of those numbers, and he can speak to those a little bit better than I can.
Okay, I was just trying to refresh my memory here, because we also had on the table a monthly pass for residents. And what did that come out to as an annual? I'm sorry, I just don't have that number off the top of my head with reference to the $14.40 that we have here.
I don't have the annual, but the monthly would be $83 per month during the peak season and $41.50 during the off-peak season.
Okay.
I seem to recall it would average $60 a month, so that'd be about $720 a year, is about half the price.
Okay, awesome. And then one last question, Ms. Luminag. Do you foresee, I'm just trying to understand the workload from the admin side, will this be the sort of thing where I know we have an upswell of Canmore residents having to get processed and getting into the system? Will it be the sort of thing where we're going to have a big bubble over this next chunk of time, for sure, where the workload to get people into the system will be high, and then after that, it will start to taper down?
I believe so. I believe we'll get a good amount of permits right now from everyone who has been waiting very patiently for the resident permit portal to be released. But I do think we'll still get a trickle of permits after the fact, just not nearly as large a volume.
Okay, all right. So it would be possible to like offload some of it if there was a labor demand required for, say, exploring an option of a monthly parking pass for non-residents, that we can make them wait a bit so that they're not actually clogging up the queue. Perhaps. Okay. All right.
Yep, that is very much possible. It also should be noted that any sort of permitting system would not be ready until 2023 to open up to non-resident employees of the town center, just because of our software development requirements.
If we needed to go with the software development requirements, right? Thank you, Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mayor Krause. I have a couple questions. I wanted to start with just sort of, there's a lot going on here. So if I apologize if I ask something that seems redundant or obvious at this point. But right now, where can someone who works downtown and commutes from out of the community, where can they park for a full 8 hours to work?
So our designated 9-hour parking stalls are outlined on the parking website on canmore.ca. They can park on Fairholme, on 7th Ave, and in the Panhandle behind Elevation Place, in addition to an extra 100 stalls behind the Home Hardware with a lot that we do have access to at the moment. So that adds up to approximately 350 parking stalls.
So the other parking lots downtown are all 2 or 4 hours?
So all of the other parking lots in downtown will be paid.
So I said right now.
Oh, right now.
Right
so
now.
A good amount. So the two that surround the 9th Street Rome bus stops are both 4 hours. The lot at Arts Place and the lot behind BMO are all day parking. Yeah.
And so then under the paid parking program, that full 8 hours is no longer available for use, even if you're paying in those lots.
Nope. So under paid parking, you will be able to pay for up to 3 days of parking at a time.
3 days. Okay.
So if you wanted to park in accordance with our traffic and road use bylaw up to 72 hours, you could pay to do so while paid parking is in effect.
Okay. And then it seems to me that we're actually at a really good point, because we're not debating the value of paid parking in our community. We're debating what is an appropriate price point for the different user types that use our parking. So in terms of of that, is there not a more simpler way to kind of structure that program? And what type of numbers would be needed to register for it to make it difficult for administration to manage in terms of workloads?
So because we haven't actually started the paid parking program yet, we have no idea how many non-resident employees will want this on a month-to-month basis. That number can fluctuate. It can grow in the summer, it can shrink in the winter. We also don't know what the sort of influx of resident parking permits we'll have from people who move into Canmore, for the summer season or for the winter season. So at this moment, because we don't have any data, I'm actually unsure of what the impact on our administrative team will be. However, if we do have a significant amount of applicants on a monthly basis for the non-resident employee pass type, then we will have to dedicate staff members to sort of be at the front desk around the clock in order to allow for that sort of permitting to occur, especially if we wanted to sort of go around and use an external permitting process, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so if, so we're talking now about non-resident employees, which would include some of the members of our neighboring community in the MD of Bighorn, which we're already considering for a type of pass, correct?
So I believe that this would be sort of lumped in together. Our town center employees would be, I assume those who would be coming either from Banff or from the MD or from, say, Cochrane.
And I guess I guess my question is, like, even though it's a lower cost, it's still a cost. So the incentive still is there to use the all-day free parking. So does this actually really undermine what we're trying to do with our integrated transportation master plan? Because we're still putting a cost on the parking.
So I don't believe that it will absolutely completely negate the value of the IPMP. However, I do fear that if we are looking to implement this permit in the name of affordability, charging people still, I believe that negates that value, if that makes sense. So when we are developing these permitting costs, we are looking at the operational costs, we're looking at the cost to the town of actually maintaining these parking spaces. So if we were to have someone come in for their 8-hour shift 5 days a week and park in the same spot, what would the cost to the town be? How can we subsidize that cost as much as possible in order to make it as affordable as possible for people who are coming into work? I believe that if there is a cost, that generally speaking, people will still be parking in those free lots, which, to your point, is, exactly what you were just saying. However, it would put that additional strain on our team. If people, say if we went with the route of developing this permit portal and we paid the $7,500 change order fee, and we're paying extra staff members to process these permits, and then over time, people realize, oh, there's a much easier option here. We just put up this huge upfront cost in order to sort of push people towards what it was that we wanted to do in the first place, which is something we can do by not implementing a permit.
But it would also give people a transition period to get used to this and to adjust to a behavior change, which really supports behavior change.
Yeah.
And that was not a question. I apologize.
Yeah.
I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Faubert. Any other questions of council? Councillor Mall?
Ms. Lubenag, you referenced the 350 stalls that we have that are 9-hour parking. And so that's the Panhandle. We have some on Fairholme and some on 7th Ave. Is there any data on capacity, degree of capacity usage? Have those ever filled up? Has anyone, because sometimes I'll hear anecdotally, people will say, oh, well, like on the weekend, it's like completely full, et cetera. And so I think that would be helpful to hear some insight from there on that piece. And I see also Mr. Sarte has his hand up.
Mr. Sarte, did you have something you would like to add?
I'll jump in on that one, Councillor Ma.
Sir?
We didn't do data collection, but we know, so for the last couple of years, we've had both the Panhandle available as well as 100 stalls adjacent to the Panhandle behind the Home Hardware lot. We've confirmed those 100 stalls are available for the summer at least, and potentially out into the fall, depending on redevelopment plans. We do know that those stalls are well utilized, but generally speaking, have not been utilized to capacity. And so speaking to the program, the potential issue is that if cheap and convenient parking for all-day use is a significant portion of the town center use, one of the big risks we have here is that we've promoted this on the basis that for a customer, if you have convenient parking available, you're willing to pay for it. And a potential risk is that you will both have to pay and convenient parking will not be available because those stalls will be utilized for all-day parking. And so what we'd like to see is a balanced use where we have a large stock of parking near Elevation Place, 220 stalls. We've got additional 150 stalls north of the town center. We'd like to see those really well used. We'd like to see them full, in fact, of all-day parking. And for all customers who are arriving in the town center to have convenient parking available for them. And that is the product that we're selling. We're selling our town center primarily. Secondarily, access to convenient parking for a small cost.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Sarte. Go ahead, Councillor Ball.
Yeah, so I'm a little confused by the numbers. Is the 350 including the 100 spots from home hardware, Mr. Sarte? Or okay, yes. and so with those 100 spots, we're assured of them through this summer season, potentially the fall. And then after that, what do you guys anticipate our volume of 9-hour spots will be moving forward into winter of 2023?
It'll be 250. It's a rolling agreement that we have with the landowner at present, so it depends on their plans. Unlikely to develop over the winter period, but 250 minimum available over that duration.
Okay, thank you. Just want to confirm.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Graham, then Hillstad, then McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm wondering, this is a little bit anecdotal, or off the cuff, I'm sorry. I'm wondering if anybody can speak to discussions with the MD. We had, a while back, Councillor Faubert had said that we are actively working with the our partners. And I'm wondering if anybody can speak to those conversations with the MD and Rome Transit's plans within the MD as well. Just a little bit of an update would be appreciated.
So I can speak to that. That comment from Councillor Faubert came from initial discussions through the intermunicipal committee. I've had several meetings with Reeve Roswald since then. She understands that this isn't about a money thing for the town. This is about meeting our mode shift objectives. And we have communicated both with the MD, well, I've personally communicated with the MD, as well as on behalf of council to all of the community associations within the MD that are within the Bow Valley, and let them know that really it is about mode shift. And if in fact, there are just general passes for non-residents, and this is beyond employees, that really doesn't help us achieve our objectives at all, because it means that there needs to be now a greater onus on Canmore residents to achieve our mode shift. And I think that that's understood. The question that is still, in my mind is what about non-resident employees of the town center? I have facilitated a discussion between Rome and Reeve Rosvold. That discussion was basically a brainstorming of maybe baby steps or initial steps that could help get Rome into the or get the MD into the Rome fold. And I believe that Reeve Rosvold has some ideas to talk about with her council. However, none of that is a quick fix. None of that's going to happen overnight. And I certainly appreciate the openness of the MD Council to consider participation in public transit, as previous councils were not as open to that conversation.
Thank you for that update, Your Worship. Appreciate it.
Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you, Mayor Crowsert. I thought I saw this number somewhere, but I can't seem to find it now. Do we know how many private parking stalls there are in the downtown core that businesses have access to? Just since we have the numbers that we have for what we can provide, I'm just curious if we have the numbers of what the private business owners actually have available to them. You have an estimate. I'll just pull it up for you, Councillor Hillstead, here in a moment.
So the approximate number, I believe, was 400, but I think there might be a more specific amount, Mr. Astarte.
Correct. Yeah, it's in the 400 range. We some of it's underground parking, so we don't have exact counts, but it's in that 400 parking stall range. So there potentially is options for some business, because I know not all businesses, some paid to the cash in lieu, so some don't have access to parking and stuff, but there would be a potential option for businesses within the downtown to either pool their parking. If they really feel that they need parking for their employees, they could park in those stalls, but I know generally a lot of stores prefer to keep that parking for their customers. But then at the same time, we're hearing that it's super important for their staff to have parking. So I'm just curious if maybe Councillor Maw could answer this, if the BA has had any discussions about pooling parking, because I know I've seen more private paid parking lots pop up in the last couple of weeks in the downtown core. So just curious about that, just because again, the town's being asked to try to solve this issue, and yet I feel the businesses definitely need to play a role in this, because I know there are businesses that that I had family that used to work at and stuff, that they provided their staff with paid parking in their lot because their lot wasn't super big, so it was not really great for customers, so they just made that parking for their staff. So I'm just kind of curious if that's ever come up with the BIA. Again, just looking at all our options here.
If I can answer Councillor Hillstead there, there's probably been some small discussions with respect to that, but as you noted, there's a varying degree of business scope, what degree of parking they actually have to make that. So at this point, there hasn't been extensive conversation for what I've seen. So yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Astarte, did you have a comment in that regard?
I do. Thank you for the question, Councillor Hillstead. One of the most emphasized pieces, in fact, of the from the consultant for the integrated parking management plan was their recommendation to have a central brokering system for private parking, and we see this in looking at utilization. A significant portion of town center parking is reserved. Private parking is reserved and not shared, which means it's going to have relatively low utilization. And so in the absence of any economic incentive, that will be the de facto case. A business is closed, but their parking is still reserved. They don't want anyone parking there. So a medical office will have parking available on a peak Saturday afternoon, for example. By creating the economic incentive, that parking all of a sudden has a value placed on it. You can't just park in free and abundant municipally provided parking. You now need to go talk to your neighbor and say, hey, I noticed your stalls are always available on Saturday. Can we work something out where our staff can park there? And so I've had a preliminary discussion with the director of the BIA that brokering system could be something as simple as a Google Sheet where that link is shared to businesses and they can go in and post if they have parking available or if they have a parking need. But certainly seeing a more efficient use of private parking is one of the significant benefits that we will see from applying, removing subsidy essentially from parking and applying a price to it.
Thank you for that. One other, just I'm not sure if it's really questions, more just a comment, is that even if we, find a way to make these parking passes available, there's still only so many stalls and it's still first come, first serve. So there's still a chance that they'll be used up before people get there. I know just when I come downtown, there's times where I choose to park in the outskirts because I know it's simpler because I'm going to find a parking spot right away and I'm going to walk in. I get that not everyone can do that. But again, we all shift and adjust to how life changes. So I just don't want people to think that if we do find a way to provide a parking pass for non-residents that, it's guaranteed parking, because it's not going to be guaranteed. It's still going to be first come, first serve, and there's still a chance that you're going to get there and you'll pay for this pass that you'll end up parking further away than you want to anyway. So just wanted to say that. So
thanks. And I think, there's a language thing that I'm learning we need to, that we're developing with a new system. I think that what I'm hearing is that monthly passes are going to refer to those passes that are a certain number of spaces within the lot that's connected to the Union Hall that has a limited capacity and it's first come, first serve, whereas being treated like a resident is maybe not best described as a monthly pass, but it's some sort of other permit. So that we're differentiating, and there's certainly maybe more options, but I think that what you said, Councillor Hillstead, still rings true. There's no guarantee that you'll get a parking spot on 7th Street or in other parts of the neighboring neighborhood or the adjacent neighborhoods. So thanks. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question for Mr. Asarte, and then a general question for the department. My first question is, several years ago, I want to say like maybe it was 2017 or 2018, prior to the Catholic Church being redeveloped downtown, there was a parking lot that it was adjacent to the church and to downtown. And the church had decided to rope that off because of liability issues. But I believe that administration had worked through the BIA to allow downtown businesses to participate and pay a monthly fee to rent a spot in that lot. Now, my anecdotal recollection was that it sat mostly empty. But I was wondering if you could speak to what the actual was, Mr. Asarte.
I'm going off memory, but your recollection is correct. The BIA, the town and BIA worked together to ensure that lot for liability, and then used a hang tag pass system that was administered by the BIA. I believe there were 20 spots available, and during the course of the summer, I think maybe 30 passes were distributed, and that lot was generally not highly utilized. And I think that just reflects the nature of people will park in the nearest convenient free parking space. Mm-hmm. And so that lot would become valuable only when the remaining lots were highly utilized, and the likelihood of getting a spot closer to your destination was low. Had there been pricing, that lot would be full all the time.
I agree. I tend to agree. I've heard a lot of questions from my colleagues, and a lot of them refer to wanting to know what's the data on this and what's the data on that. And it occurred to me that we actually can't regurgitate any data until we have a full season of paid parking. Would that be a correct assumption, Mr. Asarte?
We've studied parking usage both prior to the approval of paid parking by council, looking at general utilization and durations of utilization. During the pandemic, after the pedestrianization of Main Street, we also looked at utilization and confirmed it was in line with pre-pandemic conditions when you had some parking utilized for the pedestrian zone, changes in town center use, but still generally utilization that supported moving to pay parking. And the parking program has been collecting data, and I'll turn that over to Danielle to maybe speak a little bit about.
So we are currently in the midst of conducting a parking utilization study. We'll be looking at downtown, we'll be looking at the RPP zones surrounding downtown, as well as in the Quarry Lake area. And we are going to be looking at a few streets beyond that RPP zone to see if they are being affected. So we will be taking this parking utilization data from before paid parking is implemented. So it'll be conducted, it started a few weeks ago, and will be continuing throughout the next month or so until paid parking is implemented. We're still yet to set a final date, but we will be conducting other parking utilization studies after the implementation of paid parking, once there's sort of a calm down period and people are well aware that paid parking is in effect, so that we can see if there is a difference in our parking usage and the turnover in downtown.
And will you be able, through that that data studying, be able to determine how many non-residents are using both our paid and non-paid stalls that are maybe adjacent to our community, but not necessarily considered a tourist?
Unfortunately, no, just because in these utilization studies, we look at the vehicles that are parked in certain areas, and we look at the duration that they're parked. So we'll return on an hourly basis, and we'll see, is this vehicle still here and parked in the same spot? Is it still here 4 hours later, 5 hours later? And what area is it parked in? Is it meant to be all day parking? Is it meant to be 2 hour parking? Is it meant to be paid parking? So it'll vary based on the area of the study.
And then my final question is, we being sensitive to the fact that we need baseline data to be able to make better decisions moving forward. And so, but at the same time, there's a concern from some members of the community about this non-resident pass. Have we considered a lottery that we're willing to provide X number of non-resident passes, 50, let's say, for downtown, or 30 for downtown, and then let the businesses determine based on their staff as to who might qualify? Or one of my colleagues asked before, we really actually don't have any idea how many non-resident workforce are downtown. I would actually think that the drive-in from Cochrane would be a mitigator enough cost in terms of gas to not necessarily, I know, I'm just saying, but at nearly $2 a liter, what is it, $1.80 a liter? But I'm wondering if that is a consideration, then you would still be able to kind of control the workload to a minimal amount of folks, and then it would give us the numbers we need to determine how many people are coming in from immediately adjacent to our community to work downtown.
That is not something that has been considered, but I do feel that putting a cap on it wouldn't reflect the true numbers of those who are coming into our community from out of town. Saying a maximum of 20 or 30 permits in the town center, we would have no data on those who are using the satellite lots. How well is it that, what are their experiences? So I'm not sure that would collect the data that it is that we would hope that it would. but we would have an idea of sort of if that is the demand, you know, that maximum number of passes that would be made available, or if it's actually less.
Thanks. I agree with Councillor Hillstad. I believe that there's quite a bit of underutilized parking, private parking downtown Canmore. I see it all the time. And it would be great if those businesses bandied together to do efficiencies. We see it in neighborhoods all the time. People that have underutilized driveways, share it with their neighbors, etc. But I also am seeing people in our community, myself included, prepare themselves for this paid parking program and invest in alternative modes at great personal expense to be able to ensure that there's parking for people that need to be downtown or that want to pay or need to be in the free lot. So yeah, we've postponed this 2 years, you know, been trying to be really considerate to the BIA and to the downtown businesses. We've implemented a monthly pass, which wasn't part of the original program. We've increased the free hours to locals from a half an hour to 3 hours. I feel like we've really worked hard to work with the BIA, and the other downtown businesses, but I'm afraid I see the value in the program as is right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McCallum. Just keeping an eye on time. Will there just any other further questions? Councillor Faubert, I saw your hand up, and then I saw Councillor Ma. Nothing, Councillor Faubert. Councillor Ma, do you have a question?
This is one more question back towards Ms. Lewinag and possibly Mr. Asarte as well. I know there's been cited there's a sticking price of this $7,500, which should be like an uptick to our software contract. Has there been any sort of conversations with some of our neighboring municipalities, say MD Bighorn? You guys want to help foot that bill in the interim to like help with that sort of intermunicipal stuff, while in the meantime they haven't bridged transit over? And same thing with, say, if there's a potential workload process on permit processing, is that the sort of thing that can be compartmentalized and they could do that and then forward it to us, so that we're also not taking a risk on staff time?
Those are not conversations that have been taking place, to my recollection.
And keeping in mind, Councillor Ma, that the non-residents will come from multiple other municipalities.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be tough to convince any one municipality to take the cost on for others.
Well, they can do a portion. Like I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that the MD has to do all 7,500, but hey, if they do like a slice and like
So Councillor Ma, while you're there, just picking up on Councillor McCallum's and Councillor Hillstad's thoughts around the better utilization of private stalls. I hope that you convey that to the BIA as well as something that has come up and a potential opportunity for downtown businesses. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Any other questions on this matter? Okay. You know, I'm not completely resolved yet that I'm done exploring this, because I would like additional information around how many actually non-resident employees we're talking about, and so I would like to postpone anything further on this matter until the July 5th meeting, in hopes that we can get some data around the number of employees that are actually non-residents downtown. So I'll put that motion on the table to move this down the road. And quite frankly, if it's I mean, it will help us identify the size of the issue that we're talking about, and we'll hopefully have some better information as far as utilization of private lots as well. So I'll put a motion on the table to postpone further dealing with this matter to the July 5th meeting. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Councillor Faubert?
Man, I'm like a sharpshooter on that hand up for speaking to a motion. I'm going to support this motion. This is a really difficult one because I have uncertainty around what the actual reality will be. So more information is definitely going to be helpful. When it comes to the potential $7,500 for a change order on this, I have a really great new source of revenue from paid parking that we can use to pay for that, should that come to pass. So that, to me, I'm less concerned about that. But what I am concerned is about, like, and I know it's like we're reverse engineering this program after the fact and on the fly. And that I have a definite uncomfortable feeling around that. And I believe that the program will work as is. But in order to respond to what we hear from the community, and especially around something as critical as affordability, I think we can do more. That more starts with our understanding of what this might look like, and then directing administration appropriately after that. So I will vote in favor. I already said that twice, and now I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCallum.
A question through the chair, Mayor Krauser. Can you remind me, please, what the date was that we had deferred decision-making over parking revenues to the BIA?
That was
October?
That was no, that was the first meeting in November.
First meeting in November.
In which case we would have a sense of some revenues through to the end of September,
right?
Which admin could then report upon.
So I would like to make an amendment to your motion, sir. And I would like to change the date from the July date to the November 1st date, because I do believe that a lot of these questions will be answered as we implement the program. And the only way we can not be seen as reverse engineering the program is to actually allow the program to run. We have listened considerably to the community, particularly the downtown. We've postponed this 2 years. We have introduced resident passes. We have introduced RPP program. We have introduced many things to try and deal with and answer some of the concerns and questions from the community. And right now, what we need to do is run the program, because many of these questions will be revealed and the answers will be revealed, because anything we're really going to get is going to be an estimate. It's going to be forecasting what we think is going to be, as opposed to taking the forecasting we've done already and basically running the program for 2 months, and then taking what we've learned over the 2 months and making it better for the following year. So I am putting a motion forward to change your date from the July date to the 1st of November.
Okay, there's an amendment on the table. Would anybody like to speak to that amendment? Councillor Hillstad.
I will support that amendment. Again, right now, whether we come back in a month or with the suggested numbers or the potential numbers of how many non-residents we have, as Councillor McCallum pointed out, we've delayed this multiple times now. There's been 2 years to prepare. It shouldn't have caught anyone off guard at this point. Clearly, it still has. A few people just haven't, realized all the ins and outs of this, and quite frankly, we haven't, because we keep changing the program. So at this point, to me, I would like to, let's get all those numbers at the same time. It's the summer, so if people do have to park a little further out and walk in, it's the best time to do it. It's not the dead of winter. So to me, this is a good time to find out. I understand, there's certain people that their situation makes it tougher for them to park further out and come in. And I sympathize with that. I know for myself, I plan on parking on the outskirts when I come down to council meetings. That's my plan. I know, again, not everyone can do it, but those that can should. And so I will support Councillor McCallum's motion.
Councillor Mera on the amendment to the motion.
Thank you, Mayor Crowser. I will too support Councillor McCallum's amendment for all the points that Councillor Hillstead and McCallum have said. And I think it would be good to have a little more data. How can we make decisions without some good concrete data? I think we've done a lot of adjusting over the last little while. So I will support this amendment.
Okay. Councillor Faubert. Oh, that's a legacy hand or no?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
I went to hit the hand instead of the mute.
Okay.
I'm in favor of this amendment. In my mind, I thought at one point of asking administration if more time could be helpful for them to perhaps not just gather more information, but in terms of like thinking out, how do we tier this? How do we recognize affordability as a factor? And how do we support our business community? Because to me, that's what this is about. And we may not need to actually do this. The fact that we're exploring this should tell everyone in the community who's coming at us with this that we are listening. We are doing this work, but we cannot just change these programs quickly, especially when we're on the footsteps of implementing it after years of being very clear that this was coming. So I want to thank Councillor McCallum for adding extra time for administration to do this work.
Okay. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wasn't going to support the original motion. However, with this amendment, I am in favor of this. I too think that we've delayed this long enough. The amount of information that we would have gotten back in a month would be suspect. And I think that actually running the program and actually getting real data and actually seeing where this program will be after a month is much more valuable to me than some fairly preliminary data right at the footsteps of launching this program. So I too will support this with the amendment. Thank you.
So we're just dealing with the amendment right now. And just to be clear, Councillor Graham, I wasn't looking for parking data a month from now. I was looking for some information as to what size of an issue we have with non-resident employees in the town center. And so originally when the amendment came forward, my concern is that we weren't being as responsive as we could to the many emails and individuals who have come forward in this regard. However, I listened to what Councillor Hillstead said about recognizing the time of year that in fact would be going without any potential permit for a non-resident employee in the town center. And it is the time of year, if we don't have that and we needed that, or if we determine in the future we need that, this would be the time of year to do it. Secondly, it does give more time for the BIA to help define the issue as far as how many non-resident employee we have in the town center, as well as help facilitate some form of better utilization of private spaces. Accordingly, I will also support the amendment. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Seeing none? Okay, so I'll go Councillor Ma, and then I'll go Councillor McCallum to close.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor McCallum, could you remind me what the date was you said again? It was in November?
The first meeting in November.
Okay. I'm just running in my head here when we are running our pedestrian zone until, so I believe it's October 5th.
Yeah, middle of October, Jeff.
Okay, so we will be able to encapsulate an entire.
It'll actually be a really good time because.
Yeah, I was just trying to double check when that goes with our.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we'll be closing Main Street to pedestrians that time and open to cars, and then everything will sort of slice off at the right time in terms of data points.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I do think what Councillor Hillstad is saying about the weather being favorable for running through the season is helpful. I definitely commit to working with the ED from BIA to get this information to you guys as requested as quickly as possible. I know there can be times where it's a little tricky to get that stuff, but I feel there's a drive to do it now. Thank you.
Councillor McCallum to close.
Thank you. And I would like to thank everyone who for supporting this amendment. I also want to remind my colleagues and the public that engineering and the parking program folk have committed to making adjustments. They're not just going to start collecting data in the October 15th. They're going to be looking at it every week, as far as I have seen in the past, to see trends, etc. And I expect that if there's anything that needs to be shifted, that our engineering department and the parking folk will bring that to council as well, or make those shifts administratively if they can. I want to see this program successful. And you know, like I said before, I know that there's quite a few people in Canmore that have been preparing for this, people that don't work downtown, but that, you know, maybe frequent downtown and are adjusting how they get around town at personal expense to make sure that there's more parking for tourists, to make sure there's more parking for visitors and locals that need to go downtown on business. And I'm really pleased with the way the program has morphed and changed. You know, a half an hour parking, free parking for residents was what we were looking at in 2019. Now it's 3 hours. The RPP was only for people that lived around there. Now it's for Canmore people. We have been very responsive to the concerns and needs of the downtown during the pandemic. And I believe that we have a really good program based on what we're seeing results-wise in the West. But for us to be able to make that next shift, to be able to see how we can refine this and tweak this moving forward, we need to let the data speak. And the only way to do that is to let the program run. So I'm grateful for all of you for seeing that. And I'll pass it back to you, Mayor Krauser, to go back to the main motion. Thank you.
Actually, I'll go to the amending motion still, since we haven't voted. I will call the question on the amending motion. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now, with the main motion as amended, and really, we already have some revenue and some data information coming back to us due to a previous motion. So I'm not seeing this as adding anything further onto administration's plate. It's just that we're going to have additional information through that. We're going to have additional information through, hopefully through the BIA, as Councillor Ma will report back to us. And so really, we're just going to pick this up again, just as a check-in in early November if this motion is passed. So I'm just saying that for administration's sake. As far as the public goes, I would like to underline some of the items that Councillor McCallum and others have said, is that this has been a program that's being developed over a period of time and has improved greatly from its original inception because of having the opportunity to learn from lessons that were gained through Banff and gained through Quarry Lake. So, you know, I really appreciate the efforts of administration. We have great professionals working on a variety of fronts dealing with this, and I know that you know, even though we're not reinventing the wheel with paid parking, because we're certainly going to be able to handle this just as the thousands and thousands of municipalities around the world have. We're just trying to make sure that we're as responsive as possible to our particular situation. And I know that we're all going in the same direction in that regard. And for those who have raised concerns with respect to parking for non-resident employees, please know that we are hearing you. It is on our radar, and we will continue to assess as well as administration will assess. So with that, and I think we've all spoken very eloquently to this. I'm going to venture to call the question on the main motion as amended. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to have a...
Oh, Tanya's got something.
Okay, Councillor Faubert. Yeah, that's what I was just about to do. We're going to take a break. It's going to be a 10-minute break. I'd like us to return, I guess, 11-minute break. It's going to, at the top of the hour, depending on what time you're in, it's going to be 11 a.m. For us in the mountain zone. Councillor Faubert, I guess that will be 1 o'clock for you. And then what I anticipate we're going to do is we're going to cover a lot of material fairly quickly because a lot of it is, we're going to do our strategic plan and then some administrative things, but we will get right on top of that. See you back in 10 minutes.
We're on.
Great. All right, welcome back, everyone. We're now going to move to item F1, Council Strategic Plan 2023 to 2026. And to speak briefly to this, Dr. Cottle, welcome.
Thank you. It is me, and I do promise to try to be brief. But I also want to say, I think it's important to spend a minute and rest in, this is some really great work that council has done on this plan. Am I frozen? Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, you're all frozen on my screen, so I'll keep going.
Okay. It does say that you've started, it said that you've started to screen share, but there's nothing that we can see yet.
Okay. I'll share. Maybe I'm frozen.
We can still hear you and see you.
Okay. But my computer is frozen and I can't advance anything. So I might need a minute. I might have to leave and come back.
All right. Tell you what then, let's
move on.
While you do that, we're going to move forward to G1 because that's a housekeeping thing.
Great.
All right.
Go for it.
All right. So moving to G1, there's not going to be a presentation on this. I trust everybody's read the report, and it's really an update to the Heliport Monitoring Committee bylaw in order to clean it up for future use and making sure that its shelf life endures and takes away specific references to specific schedules, etc. So before moving to giving first reading, I would like to ask council if there are any questions of administration. I am seeing none. Therefore, I will give, I'll put on the motion, I'll put the motion forward that we give first reading to the Heliport Monitoring Committee Establishment Amending Bylaw 2022-15. Councillor Hillstad, would you like to speak to that motion?
Yes, I just have some amendments to present, which hopefully can be shared on the screen.
Great.
Oh, I am trying. I'm not sure what's going on here. Stand by.
Some very nice flowers.
Yes, they are.
We'll try again here. I'm having a few issues with the presenter screens today. Sorry, I'm just going to turn it off and turn it on again. Sorry, I don't know how to fix this. Okay, one more time. No. Sorry, I will just ask one of my colleagues to share this slide on their screens. 2 minutes.
Sure.
Cheryl, it might be that it thinks that you have a third screen. You might just have to drag it over.
Well, I only have my laptop here.
Okay.
But I know what you mean. I only have the one screen. Andrew, if you're there, can you share this?
Probably have to stop sharing. There we go.
Got any good jokes on the tip of your tongue, Sean?
What's brown and sticky?
Tell.
A stick.
Sarah, I can't believe you laughed at that.
I tried to mute and not laugh publicly.
I think this is just the resting in the
There we
work
go.
that
Right.
we talked about.
There we go. Councillor Hillstad, if you'd like to speak to these proposed amendment, what we'll do is we'll, I think, take these as a whole, unless anybody after you explain wants to deal with them one by one.
Sounds good. So yeah, these are just the first one is more of a consistency thing. In most of our committee bylaws, we have an age limit. You must be at least 18 years of age, which was just missing. So I just felt it was appropriate to add that to this bylaw. And then the 7.1 is more of an issue of, with a lot of our committee bylaws, we have a committee chair that's a public member. And so if that public member would want to resign and they happen to also be the committee chair, it just causes a bit of a conundrum. So a simple thing is to have an admin person be selected. In this case, with the Heliport committee, it's the general manager of municipal infrastructure or designate, as they, their position may change, but because of the nature of their position or designate, there should always be someone there to fulfill that duty. And then 8.2, 8.3, and 8.4 is more consistency. There's just, for some reason, the bylaw went from using shall everywhere to will in these three things. So to bring it back to shall, just for a consistent document, as everywhere else in the document, it does refer to shall. Just these three, for some reason, went to will. So that very minor editorial changes.
Great, thank you. And I would just ask a question first of administration. Who is the primary liaison on this? Is that Ms. Smithers? And I would just ask a question first.
Oh, there's an echo now. Yes, the primary liaison through the bylaw is myself as the general manager of municipal infrastructure. I have designated Stephen Hanish, the manager of facilities, to that role currently.
Great. I was just wondering if you've had any concerns with any of these proposed amendments by Councillor Hillstad.
No concerns. The only question I had, and I would perhaps ask the clerk to weigh in on this, is for 7.1, would it be more appropriate for a public member resigning to notify the municipal clerk rather than the general manager? I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other, it's just a question.
Thanks, Whitney. I have no strong opinion either. It would be fine with me if the notification was to the municipal clerk's office.
Great, thank you to you both. Councillor Hillstad, would you like to keep that as is, or do you want to change a friendly amendment?
I'm completely open to whatever the municipal clerk would like to do. I sent these to the municipal clerk, and that's what came back to me. So
okay,
if they're open to changing it, I'm totally fine with that as well.
Okay.
I would suggest the clerk, if I may, sorry, but just from the point of view of the municipal clerk does tend to be more active in managing the membership of these committees of council. So I just think it's kind of consistent with that process.
Sounds good to me.
Great. Okay, so you're accepting that as a friendly amendment, that it will be in 7.1 will be to the municipal clerk or designate. Correct?
Yep.
Okay. Great. Would anybody else like to speak to these motions? I certainly will support them. They seem very common sense. Okay, I see nobody else wanting to speak to them. I'll therefore call the question on this amendment with the, there it is. Thank you for that real-time adjustment there, clerk's office. So I'll call the question. All those in favor of this amendment? Carried unanimously. That brings us back to the first reading of the bylaw as amended. And I will now ask if there's anybody that would like to speak to this motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that council give second reading to the Heliport Monitoring Committee Establishment Amending Bylaw 2022-15. Anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now seek leave of council to give third reading to the Heliport Monitoring Committee Establishment amending bylaw 2022-15. Would anyone like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now I'll move that council give third reading to the Heliport Monitoring Committee Establishment amending bylaw 2022-15. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now I'm looking to Dr. Cottle. How are we doing?
I'm back, so we'll try again.
All right.
Better that it didn't work for the clerk to share, and then
yeah, it's definitely, we're making progress here.
Okay, you can see this.
We can see this.
Woo woo. Okay, I know we want to move along quickly, but I do want to take a minute to really review your strategic plan before we just get on with approval, because this is actually, I think, a really exciting moment in the history and the time of this council since you've been elected. So as I was preparing the report for today, I was reminded of this one of my favorite quotes by Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small, thoughtful, committed group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And in preparing for this, I'm really thinking about all of you as a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens, and really appreciate what you've laid out here for your vision and the work that you want to do in your next term, because I believe it does have the potential.
Cottle, your slides aren't advancing.
My slides aren't advancing.
You might want to, it's also not in presentation mode, so maybe from the beginning, and then just, you know, or hitting from the beginning. There we go. Oh,
is that better?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Robin.
I love that picture.
Yeah, so I'm back to this being an exciting moment because here's the quote by Margaret Mead. So you are a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens and really working to make an impact in our community. And that's a moment that I think is worth pausing for and settling in for a bit before we get on with the business of approving your strategic plan. So really wanted to take a moment to do that, because what you've done since you've been elected is really to create a powerful roadmap for the next 4 years. So as you know, we're currently in the last year of the previous council's strategic plan. And the first year of being a member of council is really about orienting to the role and all of the processes that there are to learn. And it certainly has been a very busy time for this new council since you started. The new plan, the one that you'll approve today, spans the majority of your term in office. So technically it starts in 2023 and it will carry forward into the first year of the future council's time in office, just like the last one has for you. But this is really where, as a new council, you really start to have an impact on the town's programs and services. So the rubber is about to really hit the road in your council term. So just as a reminder, as part of the strategic planning process, we look back at Canmore's history to assess challenges and successes. We reviewed all the input you received during the election process and what you heard on the campaign trail. And we reviewed the most recent citizen perspective survey results that the town of Canmore had received. You developed a vision by articulating your ideal community of the future. You created meaningful and relevant goals that will move us towards that vision. And then we asked the question, how will we know if we've achieved the goal? And we work to identify specific measurable results that will help us to track our progress. This chart is the chart that we use with our consultant, Kelly Rudick, where really the top of the pyramid is the community vision and the council strategic plan is just that second circled part there, where we're really focusing on creating goals and results as we try to move things forward. So as a reminder, the vision you created is that Canmore is authentic and resilient. Through bold, innovative leadership, we thrive as a vibrant, livable, and diverse mountain community. Your 3 goals were around livability, environment, and relationship. So with livability, Canmore is a place where all residents can thrive, and we will look to measure that through increasing affordability, making sure our emergency management communication is effective and adopted across the community, that our programs, facilities, and services help to attract and retain families and support diversity, and that we have employment opportunities that provide residents with a dignified and reasonable standard of living. For environment, we'll be working towards being a recognized leader in managing human impact on our environment. And we'll measure that by looking at wildlife encounters and trying to reduce them, and reducing unauthorized human use in our wildlife corridors, collaborating to reduce our impacts on climate change and preparing for climate adaptation, measuring the community's awareness of our environmental leadership, and advancing safe multimodal transportation shifts. And finally, in relationships, we are working to have respectful, authentic relationships as the foundation for our future success. And we'll do that through right relations with the Stoney Nakoda, all members of Treaty 7 and the Métis region, strong relationships with intergovernment, business, and non-for-profit organizations, meaningful two-way public communication, and making sure that the community understands the value of a strong and healthy public service. We also maintained the foundational pillars from the current council strategic plan, because that is what helps us to maintain a strong organization. So those three pillars are around financial stewardship, human resources, and community engagement, making sure that we're planning for the long-term interests of residents by managing our assets and our financial resources appropriately and equitably, that we really treat our people as our strongest asset, and that we're inclusive and connected, and that we are engaging citizens for effective decision-making. So moving forward, the work that you did at the start of the year was really about our part of our holistic approach to strategic planning that links visioning, goals, and results to the annual business cycle and budget. The vision and goals you've created are meant to be longer term and aspirational. The results will be things that we work as administration to implement in action over the next 3 to 5 years. So now, once council approves this, we'll turn the document over to administration, and we'll really get to work on corporate business planning. We've actually secretly started some of that work already just because of the timing of the budget cycle. But we, as Mr. Mackay mentioned in his official introduction earlier, there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm on staff for this strategic plan and for the opportunities that it's creating as we move forward. So the next steps is that we will prepare budgets to bring to you with this new strategic plan as the focus behind our budget work. We've already started a corporate-based approach to priority business planning, which is something new for the organization. We've had a session with managers in April around the livability goal. We had one in May around the relationship goal, and around the environment goal, and we'll do one in June around the relationship goal to really bring all departments together to look at what we can do to try to advance the goals and results that you're looking for. And then we will bring you later this year a 2023 and 2024 budget for approval, along with a plan for the years 2025 and 2026. So we'll have a 2-year budget and a 2-year plan that spans the length of your strategic plan. And we'll include efforts to reach those goals, plus maintain our ongoing operations when we bring that budget to you. And then going forward, we'll do an annual check-in with council on the strategic plan. So we'll work to report on our progress. We'll check in on the vision, goals, and results and make sure that they're still relevant, and make tweaks to the document as needed. So the point of this whole presentation is to ask that you approve the 2023 to 2026 strategic plan. And again, just a reminder of a context. This is important work that you've done and really setting an inspiring stage for the organization and the community as we go forward. So hats off to you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Cotto, for that overview and for reminding us to take a moment and to be in this moment, and for your leadership already before it's officially approved in already getting administration turning its collective mind to each of these items. Very much approved, very much appreciated. So with that, I'm going to see if there's any questions of council. Given it's our document, I'm I'm hoping we've already addressed all of those. Okay, I think it's fairly clear. And so I'm going to move that council approve the 2023 to 2026 strategic plan. And in just speaking to that, I've been really proud of how council and administration has worked together in the short time that we have been together since the election to come up with what I believe is a really good basis from which we can launch over the next number of years, recognizing that we need to move the needle in some areas, particularly around livability and affordability. And this is going to be hard work, and it's going to need to be bold and intentional as we've put forward. So I'm excited about it. It's something that no one of us can do on our own. It's going to take a real team effort, and that's a team effort of council working with administration and working with the community. It is our community, and we are working to move it to a place that is better than when we found it, so to speak, and use this time on council for this term to really move that needle. So I will certainly be supporting this. Would anybody else like to speak to the strategic plan? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now, I did. This was originally on the agenda for May, and so way back then, and I've sent it again. There are some motions arising that I would like to bring, and if
I am just going to try to share my screen again.
Okay.
Nope. Andrew, if you could share your screen.
Great. So there's 3 motions here. We're going to deal with each one separately. And thank you for that being on the screen there. Some of this is really to be explicit about that which is already happening. And I believe that there's a value in that, because then there is a stake that is into the ground that people can look at and say, hey, they're doing this, rather than, hey, we know that administration, for example, is doing X, Y, and Z in support of our strategic plan. But it's important that we also be explicit about it. That it's not only being done, but it's being seen to be done. And so the first motion that I would put out there is very much in that context. The council direct administration to return to council in the fall of 2022 at the time of the 2023 budget preparation and deliberation with ideas for bold initiatives that address livability and environment in Canmore, including but not limited to increasing income appropriate housing and affordability. So this, of course, completely aligns with the strategic plan that we've just passed. It also completely aligns with the process that Dr. Cottle has mentioned is already underway, and really it just puts out there to our constituents that in fact this is our plan for the immediate future, is to incorporate some bold initiatives in the 2023 budget, depending on what's brought forward to us. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that I really appreciate your leadership on these motions. We need to be seen to be doing what it is we are doing. I think that is very important. And I just really appreciated seeing these motions, and I look forward to the debate and conversation around them.
Great. Thank you. Seeing no one else, I will call the question. All those in favor of this motion? carried unanimously. The second one is very much in the similar vein, but it's directed specifically at housing. And that council direct administration to convene a council workshop by the end of June 2022 for the purpose of identifying and exploring options for the town, for how the town can, one, protect existing residential inventory in the community, and two, create, incentivize, encourage, or otherwise support additional income appropriate housing in the community, including employee housing, various forms of non-market or Canmore community housing, residential products, and market housing. Speaking to this motion, we know that the biggest component of affordability is income appropriate housing. We also know that the municipality does not traditionally find itself in this space of having to deal with housing issues, but that we recognize that we have to for the sake of our community. And so we need to take a look at each spot on the housing spectrum and ask ourselves the question, what, if any, role does the municipality have in this particular area? And I'm very pleased that we will, this will identify the timing, but right now we're looking at June 28th as having that very, very important workshop between council and administration to move forward on these questions. So I'd ask that you support this motion along the same vein as the previous one. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Councillor Ma, and then Councillor McCallum.
Thank you so much, Your Worship. I wholeheartedly support this motion. As you noted, things are getting to be pretty hot in our community. And I feel also with this current council, my esteemed colleagues, and this admin, by getting us all together deliberately and frequently and start brainstorming ideas and finding ways how we can come up with solutions. I think the think tank of our group here is really capable, and this is nothing but a positive idea and help us get where we need to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be happy to support this motion. Councillor Mayor and I just finished 2 days of strategic planning through Bow Valley Regional Housing, and there's threads in what we discussed with regards to our strategic plan that would, I think, point to some of what is in your motion. I remember when I moved Canmore and a few years in, really wise, intelligent people saying to me, oh, it couldn't get any hotter than it is now. The market cannot get any worse. People, and here we are, almost 20 years later, and it is as bad as we could have all imagined it to be for working people in our community. So I'm, again, happy to support this motion. It is part of the drum I've been beating for the last 11 years. And I really feel personally that if we don't make great strides in this term, we'll have lost the plot. There'll be no turning back. And I believe that the time is now. So I'm looking forward to having bold conversations with my colleagues to discuss ideas and initiatives that may not be popular with everybody, but will certainly move the needle on housing affordability for working people in our community.
Thank you for that, and thank you to both of you. I agree with you both 100%. Councillor Faubert.
Yeah, I don't want to talk at length too much, but I truly believe that this is where the work begins. And we have been doing it since October. This is our opportunity to show the community where we're at in terms of coming up with that strategic plan and setting out this roadmap. And every step beyond this will be towards those goals. So we are hard at work on this. We have we're focused, laser focused on what it is we need to be doing to support our community and be successful. And I am very excited to undertake this work with my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else speaking to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now, the last of these three is a little bit of a different flavor. It's more in line with the types of motions that we have had with regards to the RCMP retroactive costs and EMS services, and really sets the foundation or the platform for advocacy work. There may be a policy that we would like to see implemented with the provincial government, perhaps around debt limits associated with housing, for example, so that, because housing projects are different than regular municipal infrastructure projects. They typically have a cost, and then you recoup the cost within a period of time. So it's a temporary adjustment to a debt limit. That's just an example. Or there may be some land that is held by the federal provincial government within our region that may be helpful to us. Or there might be funding programs. Whatever it is, this gives us the basis to say, yes, council's turned its mind to it. We have the support of council to do this advocacy work. And so with that, the motion that I'd like to move is that in light of Canmore being in a housing crisis due to the extreme shortage of income appropriate housing, which if not satisfactorily addressed will have severe adverse impacts on the nature and fabric of our community, the town of Canmore calls upon the federal and provincial governments to provide support through land, policy, and or funding to assist in building additional income appropriate housing. I think that motion sets out very clearly the importance of doing this work that we all, or most of us, just spoke to, and gives us the platform upon which we can have those conversations. So I would encourage you to support this motion, and I would welcome any comments with respect to the motion. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am very much in favor of this, and while it may seem symbolic, it's absolutely necessary in order for us to begin or to continue and advance on advocacy. Over the past week, I've been at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities conference in Regina. We are not alone. And especially, we like to think we're super unique. And while the price points can be unique compared to some communities, I think that we might actually have a lot in common with remote northern communities when it comes to the struggles we're facing around building income appropriate housing. So it's out there, and the advocacy is happening, and we are going to be joining it, and it's going to be well worth our time and effort, because I do believe that at least the federal government wants to be there for municipalities to help on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Faubert and I had a conversation about this, I want to say 2 months ago, Tanya, about the idea of and the interplay between federal responsibilities and provincial responsibilities in regards to housing, and how it relates specifically to Canmore with the federal park so adjacent to us. The town of Banff and ID9 are working on a tourism sort of strategy for the future. And I find it interesting and fascinating, actually, that it's only Banff members and ID9 that are being invited to actually provide input on this, when we realize that the town of Banff and the businesses in Banff rely heavily on the land base that we have in Canmore. And the town of Canmore's, tourism relies on the notoriety of their neighbor down the road. So we have a lot of interplay in between our two communities, but because Banff is in a federal park, we're not having those conversations in the same way that I think that we could or should. We're not optimizing those discussions in the way that they could occur. There's, quite bit of the Banff workforce lives in Canmore or even in the MD. So I really think that this is an important motion. It does speak to advocacy, but it speaks to exploring relationships that we don't normally explore. And I do believe that there's been a lot of money left on the table by the provincial government from the feds to be able to supply income appropriate housing in the Valley and in our community. And there's some policy changes that could occur there. You know, I know this, that the most recent government, I believe, nullified inclusionary zoning or housing rather in the MDP, which is a shame because we worked really hard to get that in, even though we hadn't gotten the regulation piece in. So I believe that there's some small measures that would provide big impact to our community, including examining our debt limits when it comes to housing. I know that there's other municipalities that have been having those discussions with the province. What I'm trying to say here is I'm happy to support your motion, and I look forward to seeing what comes out of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too echo my colleague's sentiments, but I want to make one note of some of the wording towards the end of it. Finishing up with funding to assist in building additional income appropriate housing. And I am of the belief that some of the policy that we could require is for existing housing within our municipality. And we've come up short in the past around the MGA and our limited ability to do the things that we need to do as a community. And I'm wondering if you can speak to the wording around there, the building additional income. Was that specific? Was that, are you looking at just new, or are you looking at existing as well with this wording?
I think that the second motion that we passed, it probably speaks more to existing as well as new. If there is something that we need in the future that would affect existing, that in my mind is still building additional. It's about going forward. We can't, you know, it's about going forward. So I wouldn't get too caught up on that. I think that it's clear through the combination of these three motions that we are looking at whatever avenues are available to us to maximize the housing inventory available to residents at an income appropriate level.
I wonder if you would accept a friendly amendment to removing the words building additional. To assist in income appropriate housing. I'm not super hung up on this one, and I hear what you're saying.
I'm just thinking grammatically.
Yeah, and I'm just concerned that it's going to be pigeonholed into what we not existing and what we add to this, what we build, and I don't think that's the spirit of your intent on this one.
Yeah, just give me a moment here. Okay, I'm going to do a friendly amendment. And instead of building additional, I'm going to replace that with addressing. So the end of it will read, the town of Canmore calls upon federal and provincial governments to provide support through land policy and or funding to assist in addressing income appropriate housing. I think that meets what your concern was, Councillor Graham. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that helps
and I
clarify for me.
And I think it puts a verb back in there.
Thank you.
So that's grammatically correct. What Would anybody else like to speak to this motion? Councillor McCown, that's a legacy hand up. Okay, thanks. All right, so with the, Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do feel right now, as highlighted, some of my colleagues have gone to FCM, the affordable housing piece is national, right? And there's a lot of signaling coming from the federal governments, provincial government, it's various provincial governments are starting to make their steps. And by having this amendment, or sort of having this motion put forward, it helps create that sense of alignment. And it helps to clarify that, hey, there are opportunities that perhaps have been missed. And this is us trying to funnel that down and get really clear of what it is that we need. And I think the creativity on asking for additional tools from land and policy and funding will also be really important for us to move forward. So I will be voting in full support. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right. Councillor Graham, you had one more element or one point?
The first sentence, in light of Canmore being in a housing crisis, have we declared a housing crisis?
I think this just does.
That is the statement right there. We are in a housing crisis. Okay.
Councillor Faubert.
I think unlike a state of emergency, like declaring a housing crisis, I think we are in a crisis if we were to define what a crisis is compared to, say, an emergency or a disaster. So this is that. This is us saying formally, as a council, as the elected body of our community, that this is a crisis and therefore requires the involvement of other levels of government, because we cannot deal with this on our own. And that's where I'm at with that. And I don't think it needs to be a formalized thing. It could be in the future, perhaps, I don't know. But I am satisfied that we are in a crisis.
Yeah, I too am satisfied we are in a crisis. We haven't made any such declarations other than this statement that I'm aware of.
I see this as making a declaration. It also defines what it is, extreme shortage of income appropriate housing. And how will we know when we're out of it? When we have enough income appropriate housing. So I think that this, in fact, does exactly that. And it calls it for what it is.
Thank you. I appreciate the discussion.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. We're now going to move to new business, H1, appointment of Canmore's Downtown Business Improvement Association Board of Directors. Ms. McClett, welcome to council. We have all read your report. Is there anything that you would like to highlight for us?
No, it is quite straightforward process that we go through every year. So these are 3 individuals who have previously been on the board. So this is their second term or returned back to the term in regards to Tori Kendall.
Great. Thank you. Any questions from council? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. McClett, for this report and your time today. I will move the council appoint Jeremy Arsenault, Stephen Pearson, and Tori Kendall to the Downtown BIA Board of Directors. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. We'll now move to item H2. A great big hook coming from side stage and pulling Councillor Ma off of the board. I'm just kidding, of course, but it has come to our attention that there is a policy with the board. So I would look with H2. Ms. Hyde, we've read the report. Is there anything that you would like to highlight?
Oh, thank you, Mayor Krauser, but no, there's nothing beyond what's in the report.
Great, thank you. Any questions from council? This is simply an administrative matter to align our appointments with regards to the Library Act and their policies. So I will then move the question, I'll make the motion that council revoke the appointment of Councillor Ma as an alternate member on the Canmore Library Board. And speaking to that motion, I just would note that at future, as it's noted in the report, at future organizational meetings, we could take a different approach if we wanted to have two members. I don't think that the intent was ever to have two members. It was simply to have a backup in case one could no longer perform as a member of the committee. So with that, any other discussion on the motion? Councillor Ma.
I just wanted to say we are in more than capable hands with Councillor Mara.
Very good. I agree. Looking to call the motion then, or ask the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, we'll move now to item H3, Boulder Facility Scope and Budget Amendments. Mr. Asarte, welcome back.
Good morning again, Mayor and Council. For the report, I'm here to recommend approval of scope change and reallocation of capital funds as follows. A transfer of $150,000 from CAP 7189 Bus Barn Expansion to CAP 7206 Quarry Lake Transportation Management with a split between Green Trip and MSI. And after transfer of those funds, close out of CAP 7189. Just to briefly summarize, the 7189 project included construction of an ancillary building. There are 3 bays at the Boulder Crescent facility. 2 were being utilized by Rome for local buses. There are actually 3 local buses with spare ratio, and so they were finding wintertime that there was a need to store all 3 of the local buses in indoors for operational purposes. And so they requested use of that 3rd bay. That bay was prepared for use for buses. However, solid waste service also had a need at the time that project took place. So they were using that portion of the facility. And the project was to build a storage adjacent to the building that was heated and lit and could be used by solid waste services. The Quarry Lake Transportation Management Project was one that was approved based on a commitment from the province to help fund a route up there. Scope included planning for that route, procurement of a bus. We got a really good deal on an electric demo bus that was used up in Edmonton. That's the same as the ones we use on our fleet. And also included construction of a couple of bus stops to support that route. As part of that, with the new electric bus, there was an EV charger installation, and we used numbers directly from the commission. They had just installed a similar charger in the maintenance facility out in Banff. And so we went out and maybe I'll just flip back. So we went to procure the ancillary building 2 separate times. This was during the pandemic, lots of market dislocations happening. What we anticipated to be a relatively straightforward building procurement with material issues and cost escalation. We weren't actually successful in finding somebody who would build this within budget and in the timeframes that we had. And so with that project, we've worked with solid waste services. The bus bays are quite deep in that building. The issue is the buses are in the way of accessing the storage space at the back of the building. So Rome and solid waste services have worked out an agreement whereby there's a commitment from Rome to ensure that the buses are moved each operational day so that the empty bus bays can be used to access the storage in the back. It's not an ideal long-term solution, but certainly for the medium term, both parties are happy and committed to that, which has meant that we don't need to build a what was started as kind of a simple storage building project, when you're getting into the several $100,000 range, it starts, the business case for doing that work starts to shift. And so this gives us an opportunity to reassess long-term storage needs for Rome. And it's a low-cost option for making that operation work. We'll need to solve it at some point, but for now, those parties are happy. When it came to installing the charger, we found that the building ultimately requires a new service. And so the purpose of this transfer is to fund the work needed to bring a commercial service, a new commercial service into that facility, which will allow for electrification of all of our fleet. There will be potential to charge 3 buses in there. And so that's what's proposed is we eliminate the scope for that ancillary building. We transfer 150,000 funds from that project. Instead of building an ancillary building, we fund the installation of a service to charge the new electric buses as they come online. And then close that CAP project out, because that was its only purpose, was to build the ancillary building. And then with the increased budget, we'll lump that in with the current scope of installing the charger on CAP 7206. No new funding requirements. This is using the existing funding. And with that, I'll turn it over for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Asarte, for an excellent presentation. And as usual, bringing back some common sense, smart suggestions of how we move forward when circumstances change. I would open this up to any questions from council. I see none. So thank you very much. With that, then, I will move that council recommend approval of scope change and reallocation of capital funds as follows. First point is to transfer 150,000 from CAP 7189 bus barn expansion to CAP 7206 Quarry Lake Transportation Management as follows: $100,000 from Green Trip and 50,000 from MSI. And then the second point, or second bullet under the this motion is after the transfer of funds above, close out CAP 7189. I've already spoken to the motion in thanking Mr. Asarte for his presentation. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And we move to our last item of the day. It's item H4, Land and Property Rights Tribunal decisions regarding Smith Creek and Three Sisters Village area structure plans. Now, with regards to this item, there are a few things out of the norm. We have received some legal advice with regards to potential pecuniary interest of 3 of our councillors due to a civil lawsuit that has been brought by the Three Sisters companies. And so I will ask each of those councillors as to their position with regards to a potential pecuniary interest and recusing themselves. I will start with Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we have been advised that that there is we might be in conflict of interest in voting on this item, and so therefore I'll be recusing myself from the vote and removing myself from the meeting.
Great. And before you do so, because I'll speak to that after all 3 have spoken, I will ask Councillor Hillstad to please address the issue.
Yes,
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Adam Drazek, Town Solicitor. Can Councillor McCallum please articulate the nature of the conflict of interest that she had declared as being pecuniary under the MGA or other?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Drazek.
So yes, my computer is completely cacked out, so I'm just on my screen right now. So yeah, the matter puts me in conflict of interest through the MGA. Is that what you're referring to, sir?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, yes. Councillor McCallum, could you confirm that the interest that you're declaring is a pecuniary interest for the purpose of the Municipal Government Act, and it's on that account that you are electing to abstain from any discussion or voting and will be leaving the room? And
yes.
May we also have the clerk note that in the minutes that Councillor McCallum has recused for that purpose?
Yeah, so it is for pecuniary interest that I am recusing myself from the vote on this particular item and will be removing myself from the meeting.
And can you briefly confirm in your own words just the general nature of that pecuniary interest? I believe Mr. Mayor made reference to it, but
yes,
you should as well.
So as the public will know, there are I am been named in a civil lawsuit by Three Sisters Mountain Village Limited. And as a result of that, I will have a pecuniary interest, or we've been advised that there's a pecuniary interest with regards to this matter before council right now, and I will be recusing myself from that vote.
Great. Thank you, Councillor McCallum. And having been the guinea pig there will make it easier for your fellow councillors. I really appreciate your patience there as the information was brought forth. So now, Councillor Hillstad, having the benefit of Councillor McCallum, if you could please speak to the potential pecuniary interest that you have.
Thankfully, my computer didn't screw up, so I still have my notes. But yes, I'm declaring a pecuniary interest in the matter before council due to being personally named in an existing Court of Queen's Bench action involving the same parties and land, which may be impacted by the decision before council. As such, I will be abstaining from any discussion or voting on any questions on this matter, and I will be leaving the Zoom call and meeting quickly.
Very shortly. Great, thank you. And Councillor Mera, the same opportunity for you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, after consulting with legal counsel, I am declaring a potential pecuniary interest in the matter before council, according to the MGA. I'm personally also named in an existing Court of the Queen's Bench action involving the same parties and land, which may be impacted by the decision before council. I will be abstaining from any discussion or voting on any questions on this matter, and will be leaving the room and discussion. And I would like to ask the clerk to please note my declaration in the minutes.
And I would also like to ask that for the minutes because I forgot that part. So also put the declaration in the minutes. Thank you.
Great. So what I've heard is all three of you stating your pecuniary interest with respect to the MGA because of the being named in the civil lawsuit, that you'll all be recusing yourself from any participation in this particular matter today, and that you will be, and such will be noted in the minutes. And so with that, I would, what we're going to do is we're just dealing with this issue today, and then we're going to be adjourning. So in fact, the three of you can just sign out of the meeting, and thank you for all your good work today. All right, so now we have our minimum quorum left. And in dealing with this issue, it would be appropriate for us to have a word with our town solicitor. So I'm going to move momentarily that we go in camera. Just to note for anybody that might be watching, we are just going to be in camera for a short period of time, likely no more than 10 minutes, but very well could be 5 minutes. So you don't want to go too far. With that, I will move that we move in camera in order to have a word, solicitor-client word with our town solicitor. And I will ask that the municipal clerk put the appropriate wording in that motion in accordance with FOIP, so that we can make sure that we've done that correctly. That motion is on the table. I will call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously.
Stand by just a couple of seconds. You're back.
All right, we're back and dealing with item H4. Now, before getting to the administration report, I would like to turn our attention to some non-pecuniary perceived conflict of interest that some have suggested relate to Councillors Ma and Graham. And I would like to give them, as they're non-pecuniary, it's not something that you can recuse yourself from because the MGA requires only pecuniary interests are what you have to recuse yourself from voting. However, I think it's very important for both of you to have the opportunity to speak to your roles as councillor and this perceived conflict of interest due to your prior advocacy on this issue before being on council. Councillor Ma, please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's no secret that prior to being elected to council, I advocated strongly against the Smith Creek and Three Sisters Village ASPs. And during that process, I heard concerns about the Smith Creek and Three Sisters Village ASPs from many members of the public. And now that I've been elected as a councillor, I continue to hear these concerns. I still feel strongly about the Smith Creek and Three Sisters Village ASPs and whether or not they're in the best interest of the town. But I also recognize as a member of council, I have an obligation to listen and consider the information put before the council, what we do in debate, and to be thoughtful about those things. And I've always tried to maintain an open mind capable of persuasion. And as always, my goal is to act in the best interest of our community and for Canmore. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ma. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too have a similar statement. As many of you know, prior to being elected, I advocated vocally against the Smith Creek and Village ASPs. I still feel very strongly about the two ASPs and whether or not they're in the best interest of this town. However, I do recognize that as a member of council, I have an obligation to listen and consider all information provided to council and council debate. I always come to this chamber with an open mind, and my mind is able to be persuaded. My goal is always to act in the best interest of this town, which I know we care deeply. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to both of you. And certainly from my perspective, I've appreciated how you've been engaged in every issue that's come before us with an open mind and willing to listen, learn, and then act in the best interests of the community. So thank you for that. I'll now ask our town solicitor to present to us on the report that we've been provided. Mr. Dreidzik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Adam Dreidzik, Town Solicitor. I'll provide a brief summary as to why the administration is looking to council for direction here today and what the proposed options for that direction are. The Land and Property Rights Tribunal, which I'll refer to as the LPRT or the Tribunal, has ordered the town of Canmore to adopt the Smith Creek Area Structure Plan and Three Sisters Village Area Structure Plan as previously submitted to and considered by council. The administration is recommending that council take one of two following courses of action. Either direct the administration to bring forward the bylaws for council to adopt the two ASPs as ordered on the town by the LPRT, or direct administration to apply to the Alberta Court of Appeal for permission to appeal the LPRT decisions to the Court of Appeal. There's been council direction at multiple stages of these area structure plan processes. Council approved the terms of reference for the Smith Creek and Three Sisters Village Area Structure Plan in 2018. Those planning applications were submitted to council. They passed first reading. They received a public hearing in 2021. The Smith Creek Area Structure Plan was defeated at second reading in 2021, and the Three Sisters Village Area Structure Plan was subjected to amendments by council before being defeated at third reading in 2021. Following those defeats, the applicant for the Area Structure Plan filed an appeal regarding each of those refusals to the Land and Property Rights Tribunal. Both of those appeals were brought under Section 619 of the Municipal Government Act, and the tribunal ran 2 hearings sequentially in February and March of 2022. The result of those appeals is that the LPRT has issued a decision on each area structure plan, in both cases finding that the area structure plans are consistent with the NRCB approval that applies to the majority of the lands under these area structure plans, and has ordered the town to adopt the area structure plans as submitted and considered by council. In the case of the Three Sisters area structure plan, the tribunal's decision orders that the proposed amendments not be incorporated, and that in any event the ASP as amended was not passed. So the order is to approve the ASP as originally submitted and considered. Given this history, the administration is looking to council for direction on next steps. As for the first option, adopt the area structure plans, the LPRT decision is made against the town as the municipality, not against council. However, the Municipal Government Act provides a framework for adopting area structure plans. They're adopted as bylaws, and council is the only branch of the municipality that may make bylaws. So for the purpose of this report, we will assume that council will be the body that would adopt those area structure plans, and that would be done through first, second, and third reading on a bylaw. Section 619 of the Municipal Government Act further provides that the approval of a statutory plan amendment under this section is not subject to the general requirements of the Municipal Government Act to hold a public hearing before the second reading of a proposed planning bylaw. As the LPRT ordered the ASPs to be adopted as submitted and considered by council on specific dates, it's assumed for the purpose of this report that the ASPs must be adopted without any public hearings on those bylaw readings, and that there will be no further input or deliberation into the contents of the area structure plans. So the outcome will be to adopt the area structure plans as originally submitted and considered. The second option proposed to council is to seek permission to appeal the LPRT decisions. As Section 619 of the Municipal Government Act states that the decisions of the LPRT are final but may be appealed by the applicant or a municipality in accordance with the general provisions of the MGEA for appeals. The appeal is to the Alberta Court of Appeal on a question of law or jurisdiction, including one with decisions of this nature. So the judge hearing that application may grant permission to appeal if the judge is of the opinion that the appeal involves a question of law of sufficient importance to warrant further appeal and has a reasonable prospect of success. That appeal or application for permission to appeal must be filed within 30 days of the decision sought to be appealed. The decisions of the LPRT were issued on May 16th of 2022, so we will start the clock from that date. If the town were to apply for permission to appeal, it would also apply to the court to stay the LPRT decisions, which means basically to put the implementation of those LPR decisions on hold until the court renders a decision on the appeals to the court. So to clarify, an appeal to the court would concern a question of law or jurisdiction. This would not be a municipal planning proceeding at the court level, and the outcomes of this course of action are uncertain. The court could dismiss or allow the application for permission to appeal. If it does grant permission to appeal, then it could further dismiss or allow the appeal itself. And a successful appeal will not necessarily result in any court finding that the ASPs should be rejected, or that the Land and Property Rights Tribunal had no jurisdiction to hear the matter. One possible outcome of a successful appeal is that the court could remit the matter back to the LPRT to be redecided with some direction from the court. In any event, the NRCB approval and Section 619 of the Municipal Government Act would likely remain in place there. So in terms of the financial impacts that council should consider, the cost of litigation includes direct expenditures as well as impacts on municipal operations and human resources. Adopting the area structure plans will limit the cost of responding to and concluding these LPRT proceedings, and could reduce the cost of disposing of other litigation involving the town and the ASP applicant. Should council prefer to appeal the LPRT decisions, there are funds approved through a capital project budget for the 2022 year to respond to a number of legal actions involving the same parties, and the immediate impacts of Court of Appeal proceedings on municipal operations will be manageable. However, appealing the LPRT decisions to the Court of Appeal makes it unlikely that this or other litigation between the parties will be resolved within the current budget year, and is likely to contribute to further litigation costs that may require further funding approvals from council going forward. That, for the most part, concludes my report, subject to any questions from council.
Thank you, Mr. Dradzik. Looking to council to see if there are any questions. Seeing none, thank you for the very thorough report and advising us as to our choices. With that then, I'm looking to the recommended options, and I'm going to move the council direct administration to apply for permission to appeal Land and Property Rights Tribunal decisions LPRT 2022-MG0671 and LPRT 2022/MG0673 to the Alberta Court of Appeal. And speaking to the motion, I just have to say, council is not anti-development, but we need development that is aligned with what our community needs. The 1992 NRCB decision recognized the interests of the local community and maintained the discretion of the municipality to decide how land in Canmore would be developed, neither of which was recognized in the LPRT decisions. What we need is affordable, below-market, entry-level housing to a significantly greater extent than proposed in the two bylaws, and which is entirely consistent with the NRCB decision. And so I will, of course, support this motion. Would any other of the councillors like to speak to the motion? Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an incredibly difficult situation. Given the questions of law and jurisdiction that still remain, I am in support of seeking leave to appeal. And I recognize that in the NRCB decision, the NRCB board itself, in its 1992 decision, expressed that it had no desire to see the interests of local residents and stakeholders thwarted by the sterilization of the effectiveness of the public process in local planning matters. And with that, I concede the floor to my fellow councillors, and thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. This was a big decision to spend a lot of time thinking about. A few months ago, this council passed this new strategic plan, and a lot of energy was put towards clarifying what the elected officials beside me feel as well. Those have been silenced on what's vital for our special community to survive. And through a lot of heartfelt debate, our vision was distilled down to 3 critical goals. And the first one is livability. The Canmore, the future that we're looking for, is a place where all our residents can thrive, and sufficient affordable housing, diverse housing options, not just those at the upper end, are what is needed in the community. We've seen the staffing shortages, families struggle to lay down roots, and friends leave. And these proposed ASPs do not provide enough for our community, and if anything, will exacerbate our livability challenges. The second goal of our strat plan was the environment. Canmore wants to be recognized as a leader in managing human impacts on the environment, and TSMVPL's two proposed ASPs missed that mark in terms of size and scope. And our last goal of our strategic plan was relationships. The outpouring, the community involvement at that public hearing cannot be discounted. And if anything, is evidence of how many who do not see themselves represented in these development proposals. Since becoming a councillor, and especially after these LPRT decisions, I've heard significant stuff from the community, how these LPRT decisions are not in the best interest of Canmore. That NRCB decision of 1992 was made a generation ago, and we are still struggling to find an equitable path forward. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'll echo what you've also said, Mayor Krauser and other councillors. Our community needs development. We cannot live in a time capsule, but however, the development that occurs must be the right kind. And with that, I will also be voting in full support of an appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments with respect to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that we adjourn the meeting today. All those in favor? Carried unanimously.